Hi everyone, welcome to TWT 23. This is our first online show, which is focusing on homelessness in Liverpool. So as we are in our TWT 23, we will literally be having so many programs online that will be focusing on issues like Gypsy Roma travellers fighting against the Police Act, and also we're going to be having guests talking about John Archer as well. So we've got a fully packed lineup for you online this year. So it's really exciting. So I've got two guests here with me today, Nicholas and Tom, and they're going to be talking about their experiences of homelessness in Liverpool and the actions that they are currently taking to end homelessness locally and nationally. So as it currently stands, from the stats taken from Shelter 2022, there are 1,000 people who are sleeping rough in Liverpool. And also, Liverpool is one of three councils that are piloting the Housing First, which is getting people into housing first and then supporting them with extra needs. So I'm going to start off by asking Nicholas and Tom their experiences of homelessness, and then we're going to go on to talk on further about the actions that they will be taking moving forwards and what they're currently doing also. So Nicholas, could you tell us a little bit about your experiences of homelessness?
Okay, right. Well, if we go back to the very, very start of my experience of homelessness, it was because I became disabled, some 40 years ago with ME, and eventually had to give up work. However, the DWP doesn't seem to think that it exists as a disability. So after having been through the mill of repeals and trying to get them to pay several occasions, I eventually walked away. And I wouldn't be alive today if I hadn't done, I'm sure of it. But that was okay in a way, because that means I could actually start doing voluntary work, which I'm still doing. Not at that point, not 40 years ago, but much more recently. So I've been involved for over a decade now with night shelters and a soup kitchen, mission of charity on Seal Street here for a good few years. I've also worked with the Liverpool Waves of Hope project, which is part of the National Lottery Fulfilling Lives initiative, and that's now finished, but we were with that for about 7 years. And more recently, we have worked with Combined Authority. So we have worked with Housing First quite successfully. And also with the City Council as part of that, that's ongoing. And Crisis nationally. So I've had about a decade of experience of working around homelessness and multiple disadvantage. And Tom's had a similar experience. So I think I'll briefly hand over to him if he's if he's not frozen, which it looks like he is.
Yeah. Tom, are you with us?
Doesn't look like it, does it?
No, we'll wait for him to join us back, and then we'll come back to him. So Nicholas, thank you for telling us about the work that you've been doing locally and stuff. Could you explain to us a little bit more about the support that's available for people in Liverpool who are homeless?
Well, obviously, during my time, we've had support at the night shelter that I worked at, and the City Council is obviously active in the usual statutory domain. Waves of Hope was supporting those with multiple and complex needs, as it was then called, but it is now multiple disadvantage, and we're starting to use the term under-resourced, which is even better. And the Combined Authority is obviously one of the Housing First pilots. So there has been support there for those at the very most vulnerable end of the scale in terms of homelessness, who have multiple issues and become repeatedly homeless. That the support is there. And I think Housing First, Waves of Hope wasn't a great success. But Housing First, I think, is much more successful. And we're actually, the main idea behind all of this is co-production, whereby the people with the need are the best place to know how that need can be met. So they negotiate the support they receive with the provider. And that as a principle is still being worked out and developed. and I think it'll greatly improve the services that are offered. So that's kind of my experience. And I say it's all ongoing at this point in time. The work with the Command Authority, the work with the City Council, and with Crisis nationally now as well, which is also proving to be an exemplary piece of co-production. You can actually see that our contribution is valued and is utilised. So
when walking on the streets of Liverpool and you go, on the high street, and you see a lot of people on the streets and stuff. Could you explain, do you know anything about the outreach services here, and whether it's easy for us to report people in, and whether they do get supported, for their needs?
Right, let me explain. I'm slightly on the outside to the extent that because I basically walked away from the benefit system, I wasn't eligible for support because I couldn't get housing. So reliant upon friends since then. So many of the forms of support that most people would access, I haven't needed to access. I don't have any of the other issues around drug dependency and offending or mental health issues. So all those things aren't visible to me. I know how other people utilize them, but I personally haven't done so. If you see somebody sleeping rough, as far as I'm aware, the No Second Night Out initiative is still in operation. So you can make a call to a national number, and that is then notified, I think, to the Whitechapel Centre, who will act upon it. There are several organisations offering outreach. So the outreach is definitely there. But yes, you're absolutely right. I'm aware that there's a large number of people who are sleeping rough. You see them all around the town centre in shop doorways. And I think in a lot of cases, that's a situation where it's the benefit system has failed them rather than the actual housing support. It's people they've been sanctioned so I think that, I can speak to that the benefit system doesn't believe people are actually disabled. It just will keep pushing you and abusing you. So that's where the work really has to be done, and to realise that we haven't got a benefit system that's fit for purpose at this point. Hasn't been for a long time. They dismantled it. And I should point out,
go on.
I mean, it's worth pointing out in political fairness that was an initiative under Tony Blair, welfare benefits reform. It's not a conservative thing. It goes back further than that. So I'm not being partisan when I say that. Everyone's to blame. Yeah.
And, you've brought up the benefits. Do you think that there's any other underlying issues that are impacting homeless people and leaving them in the predicaments that they're in?
I think the problem generally is that because they have so many needs and requirements and they have to access so many different services, the general issue is that things aren't sufficiently joined up and they're not sufficiently person-centred for the people to actually get all the support that they need. I think that's the issue. And people do not want to go and tell the same story, which is distressing, to a repeated number of professionals and be assessed repeatedly. That just does not work for them. So I think Tom's back.
Yeah, so Tom's back.
I think in that sense, but that's why co-production matters. The people that are actually receiving the support deal with those that are providing it, and we keep informing them how it can be improved. And that has to be an ongoing situation. Let's see if Tom can speak to us now, shall we?
Yeah, Tom, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of homelessness in Liverpool, please?
We've seen a sharp incline in people becoming homeless ever since COVID, really. As for Housing First, it's a short pilot scheme that I think's actually helping. It's good. I heard what Nicholas said about people sleeping on the streets, and I get a little bit confused because I work in a voluntary organisation where you can come in, use the telephone, get something to eat, etc. And I know half of the people who are on the streets looking like the homeless have actually got their own places to live. So it's hard to judge these days who's actually homeless and who's doing it begging. because the system's letting them down. As for homelessness, I think it's a bloody disgrace. I don't think the services are joined up as well as they should be. Some services are trying a lot harder and getting better results than others. Some are better resourced than others and are still not pulling the weight. It's a shame. It's this new approach to the one night out only that Liverpool had. It seems to have gone by the wayside. We, as a charity, used to be able to refer people onto property pool, but now we have to go through one service or another just to get access for someone to be told, oh, we'll phone you up at 5 o'clock, when this guy or girl's just come off the street and haven't got a phone to phone them up at 5 o'clock. It's all a bit disjointed and disheartening in Liverpool at the minute services. I think they really need a good shake up again.
Yeah, so Tom, can you explain a little bit more about the voluntary organisation you're working with, please?
Well, I'm with a couple. I'm with the Big Life support. So I'm also with Housing First, which I do believe is doing good. But again, it's only such a small percentage of people that they're seeing because of the cost. That it's
so how do you think? So how do you think that Housing First can improve?
Well, it can be better resourced, and it is one of the better resourced groups out there. I think the pilot scheme should be introduced nationally, and I think that would help benefit people. Homelessness just doesn't stop when you get a flat. Homelessness stops when you make that flat or that house your home, and that takes time. That's where the services, it needs to be a wraparound services like Housing First that look after you before you get the property and after you get the property. Or otherwise, we get stuck in the mess we're in now, where we get the same people every 2 or 3 years going through round and round the same system, and they get lost in it.
So
I think it should be rolled out next year.
So Nicholas, can you explain about the organisation that you're working with and the work that you're doing with them?
Okay, well, it's much the same as Tom. We've followed very similar paths. I worked with Waves of Hope. Tom did. We're both working with Crisis Nationally. We're both working with the Combined Authority and the City Council. So it's very, very similar. I set for the night shelter and soup kitchen that he didn't. But other than that, we had a very similar path. So I've known him for about a decade. What I can say, a couple of points that Tom made. I think from the point of view of the viewing public here, a lot of people just think homelessness is only people rough sleeping in shop doorways. But of course, that's by no means the case. Anyone in a hostel hasn't got their own accommodation and it's not secure or permanent. Anybody sofa surfing, even worse. And many people are locked into abusive relationships because they can't leave because they would be made homeless. So there's a lot of hidden homelessness out there. So it's a much wider issue than what is immediately visible. And I think everyone in the country now knows that they're not far away from defaulting on their mortgage. So we have a housing crisis because of housing costs, be it selling prices or rental prices, hasn't been addressed for a very long while. And I see just this morning in the newspaper that the present administration and Labour are proposing quite different approaches to this. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out in the future. But it's certainly a crisis that's been here for decades, and it hasn't been declared as such. So it's much broader than people imagine.
So, Tom, can you explain a bit about the work that you've been doing with Crisis, please?
We can't hear you, Tom.
We can't hear you, Tom, mate.
New equipment. Only got it 3 days ago. Come on, Tom. Still can't hear you.
We still can't hear you, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, go on.
Yes, it's a new tablet. I still don't know where the camera is on the bloody thing. Never mind the mic.
I've
been with Crisis, the organisation, for roughly just over 18 months. I started on a project where they were looking for people who have experienced homelessness to sit on a group called Fancy Studios to see if 3 or 4 firms or companies they were looking at was worth investing in with a purpose to end homelessness. This was programs. They're building homes on top of buildings, empty flat roof buildings, spaces where you don't think you could put a house or a flat, but you could. Prefab housing, work easy to put up. Started with that, and then moved on to the member involvement team. Since then, I've been part of putting the next 10-year plan of Crisis into effect. We've done drug and alcohol safety leaflets. We've done a whole host of things, but the one thing I can say about Crisis, because I've been doing this a long time, and everyone knows about co-production now. To me, co-production was, and still is in the main, a company that you're working for or volunteering for, coming up saying to you, here's the document that we've proposed, will you just tick that box that you've read it? But with Crisis, they bring you in from the start of the project and work with you right through until the end. That is the biggest difference with Crisis. The Crisis model of interacting with their members and getting them to join in along with their service is one of the best examples I could give.
Thank you, Tom. And Nicholas, can you talk about your experiences with Crisis, please?
I'd agree with exactly with what Tom has said. They brought us in on a lot of what they do is they offer us so-called opportunities, and it's different projects, initiatives within the organisation. So I've worked on 30 or 40 different instances at this point, from marketing exercises to looking at policy and how you describe homelessness. It's very, very broad and across the whole organisation. And I agree with Tom, it's authentic co-production. You can see they've actually taken on board what you've said and used it and put it into practice. And that's not, as he said quite correctly, that's not always the case. A lot of the cases, the level of involvement is actually quite tokenistic or minimal. You're brought in to, someone else does the work and you're asked to comment on it, basically. That is not starting with a blank sheet of paper. So I would agree, Crisis is a very good example of co-production, and it is meaningful and effective. And it's a lot to be said for it. So that's also, that is definitely good from their point of view, that they're leading in this in many ways. Our experience has been very good for Crisis. Although what's Tom doing now?
So Tom, can you tell us, what do you think the politicians should be focusing on now with homelessness? What is the priority, in your opinion, for ending homelessness in this country?
Oh, this is a good one. Many years ago, the councils all around the country gave the the council's houses, they gave them to the so-called housing associations or not-for-profit charitable housing associations to look after. Now, in my area, in such a short street, 5 or 6 streets, one housing association has sold 5 to 8 homes privately, which is now being taken off the social register for people of Liverpool to get a home. And these houses are Georgian houses, so you could get 3 very good flats, you're in them. So if they took 10 off, say 10 homes from a housing association that is not meant to make a profit, everyone makes a profit, that's a load of bull, that not for profit. But to take them off the waiting list, so them houses are now no longer there, it's just adding to the problem. We need to reset the boundaries of these housing associations and what they can and what they can't do. We've heard a lot about Section 23 lately, but that's just one of the sections they can remove you from your home without you wanting to. There's different sections. It needs, what's the word? The boundaries need reset and the guidelines need to be updated and organised in a way that is transparent. I'm sick of hearing not-for-profit charitable organisations. Everybody makes a profit or they wouldn't do it. You know, it's just they're meant to put it back into the housing association to build new homes, but we don't. We need a housing programme.
Well, there's a broader point here, and that is, again, my life elegantly drops into pre-Thatcher and post-Thatcher. She came in when I was about 18, so I'd actually grew up as a child without her and then recognised how things changed when she came into power. The fact of the matter is, and this is what Labour have to be thinking about as they present themselves, is that the argument basically back then, under what were quite similar circumstances of high inflation and so on, was that market forces would solve every problem. And it's now abundantly clear that market forces are the problem, and we need a different approach. Under the profit motive, we've got a housing crisis, and it's not going to get resolved. So a different approach needs to be adopted, or we're compromising people's lives going forward if they can't have their own properties. This is affecting a whole generation going forward. So, I mean, it is worth reflecting that if you look at the policies adopted within the devolved administrations, Wales and Scotland, their experiences are better. So the situation you're in is one of political choice. We did do better during the pandemic. I mean, I accept that a lot of it, people were given accommodation in hotels, and that obviously isn't a long-term solution. I'm not suggesting it is. But it was amazing how we reduced homelessness at a stroke when it had to be done. It can be done. It is a question of political choice, and that is what Labour now, as the next government, all being well, there'll be nobody else, will it? So have to really look at.
Nicholas, do you feel putting people in really run-down hotels as a short-term solution is effective and cost-effective at that?
No, it was an emergency measure and it couldn't be a long-term measure. But the point being was, with the political will, homelessness went right down temporarily, and some people who got that support did actually accept the support in the longer term and did up in permanent accommodation. When they were given the extra support, which we've long argued for, the intensive support, they exploited it. and settled their situation and moved on. That wasn't as happening as much previously. So it does show what can be done. That would be my argument.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, with the lack of political will from all parties in the country, this is why we're still in the predicament that we are in terms of, you know, we got 37,000 people off the streets during the pandemic, whereas the government was saying before the pandemic that there was only 6,000 people on the streets every given night. So I feel like the issue is that they don't have the correct stats on who's actually out there, because they simply don't know. And they're literally going off on outreach counts as well.
Well, the way they define rough sleeping, you have to be seen lying down in your bedding, not even sitting up. And the people making the count don't know the local area where people will be hiding. So the counts are meaningless. It's a question of lying with statistics in that case. The outreach organisations involved in homelessness know the figures from their own experience are vastly higher. So the official figures aren't worth a carrot, probably. But all you can say is when they change, the real situation will have changed in a similar way. If it goes up 50% on the official count, it's gone up 50% in real life, just for example. So, the official count isn't worthwhile. It defines the problem out of existence.
Go back to putting someone in a hotel for a month. The cost of that 1 month, that could house you in a proper 1-bedroom flat for 3 months. Only the problem is the 1-bedroom flats aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of 1-bedroom flats, plus 3 and 4 family bedrooms, which is not getting looked at. Everyone's looking at the homeless as it's a one-person problem, when it's a family problem as well. You know, if there's a shortage of 3 or 4 bedroom homes, that affects families. They're splitting families up. You've got the mother in one hostel, the father in another, and the children, if they're lucky, staying with a relative, or that they're put into care until they find somewhere to live. It's a bloody joke. The old system is just doesn't work.
Would you say it's easy? Yeah, go on. Would you say it's easy for people to get support into other services who are homeless? So drug and alcohol services, you know, employment services, any of these other services. Is it easy for them to do it, or is it a struggle?
I still feel as a culture is if you have a problem with alcohol and mental health, say dual diagnosis, if you go for support and you tell them I've got a drink and a mental health problem, the alcohol service will say go to your GP, get your mental health sorted out first, and then come back to us. You go to your GP, they turn around and say you need to go to the alcohol service first, and then we can help you with your mental health, because it's your alcohol that's causing it. So it's always a no-win factor. It's very hard for someone to say, oh, hang on, he's got more than one issue here. Let's address the whole of the problem instead of just the little bit of alcohol or the little bit of drugs, whatever it is, and give the support right through what they need. It's so hard. I think it's easy for services to link in with each other once they've been given permission to do so by the person. But there's no willingness to do that. The services don't push for that. It's still a case of we want you because we need you to get our funding, and if we let you go, we're going to lose our funding. And that is a problem.
I mean, there are two issues here. I mean, what we basically, this is a broad political point again.
Yeah.
The government doesn't accept, the benefit system doesn't accept that there are some people, not that many, but there are some people who will need lifelong, intensive, multiple faceted support and will never work. It's just, there are people in that situation. They're extremely vulnerable. And bullying them for the benefit system is not the way to go. And I think, regrettably, a lot of the things Tom and I have been involved in that have offered intensive support, it's on the basis of not about improving people's quality of life. It's on the basis of, if we spend this on the intensive support, we'll save a greater sum in terms of what the health service has to spend, criminal justice has to spend. So it's actually a financial thing. You're spending more somewhere to save more money elsewhere. It's not about the person. It's a purely financial approach. And we regrettably believe that in many ways the benefit system believes that the less support you offer people, the quicker they'll pass away. And therefore you don't have to pay them at that. So it minimizes the cost in that way. So I think it's extremely cynical. I don't know what Tom's view would be on that.
Yeah, what do you think, Tom?
I feel on that point is where they're not looking at, it's all short-term thinking. There's no long-term thinking. They're not thinking, if we give this support and let's get the right support to them now, we're going to save money 10, 15, 20 years down the line. What's going to be needed? That's what should happen. But it doesn't. It's all short-term thinking. Let's just fix this problem and worry about our budget and make sure that our budget doesn't get cut. Because if we're doing so well, you think if you were doing so well, you'd get a better and a bigger budget. Well, it's vice versa. If you're doing so well, half the time they restrict your budget because they say, well, we don't need that bit of service no more because you completed it. It's all short-term thinking. There's no long-term investment in people's future, and no consideration of the savings to the NHS or the public purse. It's all thinking about our service, what we have, and how we keep it running. And I feel that's the wrong way to do it.
Well, that's another point as well. Is that, sorry.
Go on, Nick.
What I was going to say was, to address the other point Tom made earlier, that again, it's the problem with market forces. The fact that all of these organisations that are providing support are in competition with each other and don't want to lose people they're supporting because they're then going to get a smaller budget. That doesn't help. It would be much better if simply public funds were spent by looking at what the need was and addressing it.
Yeah. Rather
than having people. So again, market forces in that case are actually very, very dysfunctional, not helping the individual at all. But again, this is pure politics, and this is why we're not addressing the climate situation, for example. Politicians are tied to 5-year electoral cycles. They're not here in 20 years. That's not their problem. You know, they're looking for an immediate fix. And if you're a commercial organization, it's an even shorter period of time. So again, it's our relationship to money and to time is a lot of the wrong way of looking at it, put it like that.
Surely, Nicholas, even politicians over a 5-year period, they must realise when they're looking at the figures that, okay, it mightn't help us now, but it will help us in 15, 20 years' time, when it still may be our government that is in office. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a different government.
I'd be very surprised if any government's in office for 20 years.
It's true, though.
You might be out of government for 10 years, but then on the 15th year, you could be back in government when them savings they made 10 years prior can now be used for more better purposes.
Well, that is true, but
Yeah,
believe me, this one's not going to get in for a fourth term.
So,
Hopefully, unless things
in
go
terms
very
of
badly wrong.
so in terms of like the grassroots, because I know there is a lot of grassroots activity in Liverpool, like there's plenty of it in terms of Black Lives Matter. There's also Acorn, I believe, as well, who deal with the evictions down here. What is going on in terms of homelessness? Is there any grassroots action going on currently?
Okay, we don't see a lot of that the way we're working, but what I do know is there's a lot of organisations are out on the streets offering food and drink, that sort of outreach. There's a lot of that, or
Oh, wow.
of their own initiatives, not getting public funds at all that I'm aware. A lot of churches involved, other faith organisations, the mosque, Liverpool Citizens is being set up under Citizens UK. There's a lot of small scale private initiatives that are out there, and they're not coordinated, and it would be better if they were, because I do know that some nights there are some people out on the streets offering food, other nights there's nobody. So some coordination there would be definitely helpful. But yeah, I think
Tom, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it is getting really better with the stores giving food away at the end of the day. So local charities who support the homeless, they seem to be engaging a lot more in Liverpool. And it's not just for the homeless. They give food away to many different programs for children's events and stuff. It seems to be doing very well, where the big companies are now realising it's cheaper to give the food away than it is to dispose of it in a site that they have to pay for. So it's a saving for them as well, and I think they're getting onto that now. And I also see an improvement in communities as well. People are taking action, like you just said yourself before, Nicholas, themselves, like they used to do in the early days. They're making sure the neighbour has got food. They're making sure the neighbour's bloody okay for the start. I see a lot more of that in my area than I used to now.
Well, here's an interesting example. Let me just give my personal experience on that. When I worked at the night shelter and soup kitchen, which was religious houses, I think I said, missions to charity. At one time, you stopped doing it now, but at one time, we used to pet a manger who don't keep stuff overnight because they don't date it. We used to literally collect all this end of day stock from 2 stores, and we had enough to serve. I used to serve at the front door between 50 to 100 people every single day with what they gave us. It was a phenomenal amount of food, and it would have literally gone in the bin otherwise. But and here's the point. I've had friends who've worked in Holland, and apparently supermarkets over there at the end of the day have to give their outdated food to a central warehouse, and anyone with an unemployment benefit card can turn up and take whatever they want. And so food doesn't get, why we could do that here. So, we don't have to have that waste.
There is one food bank I know of in Liverpool that actually gives you meat, fresh meat. And that's very rare in a food bank. Even to get 6 eggs is very rare.
Well, I should add that from my own experience, I know a lot of the food banks are suffering because they've got increased demand, reduced donations. I know food banks that have closed. So that they shouldn't even exist, of course. If I told my friends I had food banks, they wouldn't believe me. They're gone now, of course. But I mean, that was never going to be a lot. It's become part of the landscape now. It should never have been there. It should not even as a temporary solution. But it's now become kind of accepted. It's not at all good.
Yeah. No, I agree. So both of you, what would what advice would you give to people who are homeless in Liverpool, and how would you, how would you tell them about the support that they would receive and ways that they can navigate it as well?
I think the route in now, during the pandemic, there was only one way of applying for an accommodation if you were homeless. It used to be you could apply wherever the provider was. But
Yeah.
I think the position still is you have to go through the council and something called housing options, as far as I'm aware. So that is the only route in. You can't approach. In the old days, the main organisation was the Whitechapel. You'd simply walk in,
Yeah.
but you don't think you can do that now. So all you can do is
You can't walk in, but it still is the main point.
sorry.
What was that,
The
Tom?
Whitechapel. The Whitechapel still is the main access point for people being homeless. But as Nicholas says, you can't walk in. You tell you to make an appointment. Even when you get an appointment and you see them, they can't offer you a place straight away. They'll say to you, we'll phone you by 5 a.m. this evening and let you know if we've found somewhere for you. Now, that's great if you can sit in somewhere till 5 a.m. where there is access to a phone. But if you've got no means to a phone, how the hell are they supposed to get in touch with you? There's no walking no more, like it says.
And what about those
anyone,
fleeing domestic abuse as well?
yes, true. Anyone going through homelessness today, I'd tell them to ask to speak to the service navigator and ask them which is the best approach to go through. What other services? As far as I know, from when I was homelessness, no one told me what services were out there. When I registered with the Whitechapel, they never told me there was other services out there. I had to find them out myself. When I was homeless, walking around, people telling me you can get out here, you can get out there. So now, if anyone presenting homeless where we are, we tell them to ask when they get the appointment, to ask what services are available for me and what services do they know about, so they can access them themselves a lot quicker. Because it is basically better to get off your own ass and do it yourself than waiting for the key worker to be appointed to you to get it done that way. Ask them what's out there and then come out and look for it. That's what I'd tell anybody who's homeless now. Don't sit there and wait for your wait forever.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Nick?
I think he's probably right. There is only one route in. You go by the city council. They're meant to get back to you by 5 o'clock. It doesn't always happen. It then gets passed to care line social services. It's dealt with overnight. What you have to remember is that Liverpool City Council at this point has the commissioners in. And this is very, very regrettable because it constrains what they can do. Everyone's looking over their shoulder, everybody else's shoulder. So that doesn't help. And of course, there's the many years of greatly reduced council funding. 13 years of reducing our budget on an ongoing basis. So the council finds itself in a very, very difficult position at this point in time.
Yeah. So looking forward to the future now, like what do you want to see happen, like in terms of the access to support for homeless people and ensuring that they stay off the streets?
Want to go first, Tom?
Yeah.
Nick, you go first, or I can. It's up to you.
Well, okay. I think it probably, again, I keep putting words in Tom's mouth as I always do. I would like to see the Housing First pilot become permanent and across the country. I think it is effective. It does support those that have the greatest support needs. And I say it's a pilot right now, but it was been extended once already to my knowledge. I think maybe more than once. And if that were extended as a principle, I think that would probably be the best approach at this point in time, unless somebody can think of something better. And they probably can't. Housing first is an approach that's been used around the world successfully. So I doubt it'll be bettered somehow. Right, that's my part. That's my view.
Go on, Tom.
Yeah, again, it's, you know, make knows the big words, but I can translate his big words into simple words that everyone can understand, thankfully. Yes, I would go with a certain type of housing first approach.
Yeah.
And you know, the empty properties that are around, after a certain amount of time, say 2 years, if that property, private or not, has not been, no one's accessed it, and it's just getting left to rot and get worse and worse, after a certain amount of time, I think the council or the authority should have the permission to say, right, we're taking over that property and we're bringing it back into service. That would be amazing, because I'm sick of seeing tinned up boards or at homes that are left rotten for years. And it's all because someone's got old and is now living in old people's folks' home, and the family's just boarded the house up.
Wow.
Until it's just getting left to rot.
Yeah. So I did some research and I found that in Liverpool, as it stands currently, that there's 20,000 empty homes just sat there, like nothing's being done with them. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's not just homes. I mean, it's worth pointing out that there's a lot of commercial property that's unused or underutilized. There's plenty of accommodation above shops that could be pressed into use that's not in use. We have a long history in this city of properties being left to rot, and it's not just residential properties. There's a lot could be done if they had the administration was able, like as Tom rightly says, to forcibly acquire these and put them into use. It'd be a very good idea.
Yeah. Tom, your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, again, apart from accessing the homes after a certain amount of time, these private landlords, they need a good kick up the arse. They need to be brought into the 21st century, and they should be given livable quarters. Okay, you can make a profit, but don't fucking take the back out of someone just to let them live in a house. You know, if people are going to work and half of the wages are going on rent because it's a private house, that has got to be capped somewhere at affordable, decent level. I'm not saying you can't make a profit. I'm just saying,
well, it's worth
pointing, such a big profit. You know,
it's worth pointing out that some years ago, Liverpool brought in a licensing scheme for landlords, which did enforce standards, but the government then stopped any other authority doing it, and we had to stop doing it. I believe it's come back in now, I think.
Yeah, so in some parts
it's a matter of where there are market forces. My general view on market forces is you have to regulate them to within their lives, otherwise they will be abusive. So you have to have market forces, but you have to regulate them, and they make sure they work.
If you buy one home and turn that 3-bedroom home into a 9-bedroom bed sit, you're making profit on each one. It's disgraceful how they're living. There's 9 bed sits, you're sitting and eating and shitting in the same room. It's a third world way of looking at things. You know, there's got to be some kind of line where these people who are renting the properties must have a responsibility and a duty of care for the persons that they're giving the properties to. not overcrowding and little dirty bedsits.
Right, so we're almost coming to the end of the session now. Do you have
Yep.
any final thoughts about homelessness in Liverpool before we wrap up? So I'm going to go
I
to
think
you
we've done
first, Nicholas.
I think we've covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
I think all I would say was regarding the people massively over-occupying properties, Brexit does have some role to play there. I think a lot of people that came here who were Europeans didn't know about standards and such like, and did over-occupy. But of course, they've now nearly all gone. So kind of that problem's disappeared. Not that I support Brexit for 1 second.
Yeah.
But some people just went aware of what their rights were, and they were abused. And that problem is to some extent now. When I was in the night shelter, that was all Europeans who had no recourse to public funds.
Yeah.
And that's completely changed, of course. So, yeah.
Tom, any final thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, to add on to what Nicholas just said, I heard in a crisis meeting of one of the meetings I was on, is in European countries they don't have homelessness in the extent that we have it. They're amazed when they get here or shocked at the way we treat the homelessness. I think we can look at other countries in Europe and maybe use them as an example of where we should be going.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, we should still compare ourselves to other European countries, even though we're not part of Europe in the same way. That doesn't mean we shouldn't compare ourselves. We should.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining me today and talking about the experiences of people's homelessness in Liverpool. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing from both of you. I've actually learned a lot more about the homelessness situation in Liverpool just by listening to you two. And it sounds like everywhere else pretty much. So thank you again for joining us. And yeah, it was great. And I wish you both a great afternoon and hopefully catch up with you soon before I go back to London.
Thank you very much.
Take care, my love. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.